Hello, welcome to Economics for the IB Diploma. This is Unit 1.4. Today, we are going to talk about the method of economics. You can pause the video now and read the following learning objectives. Pause the video now. Now, I want you to take a look at this picture. In this picture, you see some children working informally. School children working during the weekdays. What could be your interpretation of this? You might think, on the one hand, that that is a sad image because children should not be working. Or perhaps you might say that the government should do something so that they don't work. You might also think about the families. So you are going to respond to a specific situation based on certain glasses, some perspective you have. So you might think subjectively or more objectively. And this is today our focus. We are going to see two different perspectives to analyze specific economic situation. Today, I will talk about positive versus normative economics. So let me explain what positive and normative statements are. Economists think that the economic world in two different ways. They see that in two different ways. One way of thinking tries to describe, explain, and predict economic events. This is called positive economics. And this is based on positive statements, which are about something that is, was, or will be. Positive statements are used to describe, explain, or predict economic events by use of hypotheses, theories, and models. Let me give you some examples of these positive statements. Positive statements may describe something. For example, the unemployment rate is 5%. And industrial output grew by 3%. These are two statements that describe the level of unemployment and growth of industrial output. Positive statements, number two, may be statements in a hypothesis that tries to explain something. For example, the statement, a higher price of apples results in fewer apples purchased. This is a statement that provides an explanation of why fewer apples are purchased. Number three, positive statements may be statements that predict a future event. For example, unemployment will increase next year. This predicts what will happen to unemployment next year. On the other way of thinking deals with how things in the economy should or ought to be. This is called normative economics. And it is based on beliefs or value judgments about what should happen, on about what is good or bad, about what is right or wrong. It is used in making economic policies. Examples of this may include the following. Number one, the unemployment rate should be lower. This statement is based on a belief or value that high unemployment is not a good thing. Number two, healthcare should be available free of charge. This statement is about the value that everyone in a society should have access to free healthcare. Or number three, the government should spend more money on building schools. This is a policy recommendation about what the government should do. So let's go back to the example given at the beginning. And if you see the level of informality or is higher in my country. This is an example that tends to be more objective. So we would say that this statement is a positive statement. However, if I say the level of informality should be reduced, this has to do more with policies and what you think is right to do. So this would be a normative statement. So we have now, through this example, the contrast between these two type of statements, positive and normative. Now, take a look at table 1.3, this one. And in here, you see more examples of positive and normative economics. Know that the statements in positive economics may be factually correct, or they may be false. So when we talk about positive economics, do not forget that it could be right or wrong, information that is misleading perhaps. For example, we may say that the unemployment rate is 5%. If the unemployment rate is 5%, this statement is correct. But if the unemployment rate is actually 7%, the statement is false. Statements in normative economics, by contrast, cannot be true or false because they are subjective. This is what you consider should be happening. So they can only be assessed relative to beliefs and value judgments. Consider the normative statement. The unemployment rate should be lower. We cannot say whether this statement is true or false, though we may agree or disagree with it, depending on our beliefs about unemployment. If we believe that the present unemployment rate is too high, then we will agree. But if we believe that the present unemployment rate is not too high, then we will disagree. So here you have in table 1.3, both type of economics, positive and normative. Okay, you can read a table. Incomes have fallen by 7%, positive economics. By contrast, incomes should be increased, normative economics. On the one hand, free university education will increase government spending by 3%. By contrast, there should be free university education. Income inequality is increasing. Income inequality has increased too much. Women are often paid less than men for the same work. Women and men should receive equal pay for the same work. Higher taxes will result in lower disposable incomes. Taxes are too low and should be increased. So bear in mind, please, that in positive economics, these statements can be true or false. Now, on the other hand, in normative economics, these statements are statements that you can agree or disagree, or perhaps agree to some extent. Now, what is the role of positive economics? In economics, as in other social and natural sciences, our efforts to gain knowledge about the world involve the formulation of hypotheses, theories, laws, and models. All of these are based on the use of logic. All of these lie within the realm of positive economics. So we are now more, getting in depth, getting inside the world of positive economics. So first of all, the use of logic. As we have seen above, positive economics involve thinking about the economic world in order to try to describe, explain, or make predictions about economic events. Positive economic thinking is used to describe and explain in a systematic way why economics events happen the way they do, and attempts to predict economic events that are likely to occur in the future. So this type of thinking is based on the use of logic. Well, logic is a Greek word, logiki, which means reason. It is a method of reasoning, which involves making a series of statements, each of which is true if the preceding statements are true. For example, number one, when it rains, there are clouds in the sky. Number two, it is now raining. Number three, therefore, there are clouds in the sky. So this is a sequence of ideas that are true and well connected. They are obviously logically connected. The truth of the third statement, number three, therefore there are clouds in the sky. So this sort of conclusion is based on the truth of the two previous statements. So therefore, we can say that the third statement is logical as it is based on logic. Economists use logical thinking to acquire knowledge of the economic world. Since economics is a social science, economists acquire a knowledge by use of scientific methods. You may already be familiar with this from your study of the natural sciences like physics, biology, and chemistry. The scientific method is based on the use of logic. Okay, so point number one of the role of positive economics is number one, the use of logic. What about number two? Point number two, the use of hypothesis. A hypothesis with I is an educated guess. It's an assumption, okay? Usually indicating a cause and effect relationship about an event. Hypotheses, plural with E, are often stated as if, then. So we have a conditional there. In order to formulate a hypothesis, economists make observations of the world around them and identify a question they would like to answer. Let's consider an example from economics. We observe that people living in the city of Olemu buy different amounts of oranges per week at different times in the year. So in this city, Olemu, people buy different amounts of oranges per week and at different times in the year. So we want to answer the question, why are more oranges bought in some weeks and fewer in others? So this is a task. We then identify variables. So you need to know why people buy more oranges in some weeks or days of the year. So we need to identify variables. One variable, well, a variable is any measure that can take on different values, such as temperature, weight, or distance. In this example, the variables we choose to study are the quantity of oranges, right? Because we want to know why people buy more oranges, so quantity, that these residents of Olemu buy each week. And also another variable is the price of oranges. So what is the next step? The next step is to make a hypothesis about how the variables are related to each other. And this is something important for your internal. So okay, we have seen that a hypothesis is an educated guess. That's the definition of hypothesis. So if, then, action, consequence, okay? So there is a relationship between variable one and variable two. Now, our hypothesis is the following. If the price of oranges, increases, then the quantity of oranges Olemonians want to buy will fall. So that means the higher the price, the fewer quantity, the fewer goods people buy. That is the hypothesis. Hypothesis indicates a cause and effect relationship where price is the cause, price, the variable, number one, price, cause. The quantity of oranges is the effect. So the hypothesis also involves a prediction because it claims that changes in the price of oranges will lead to a particular change in the quantity of oranges Olemonians buy. So point number two of normative economics is the use of hypothesis. Number three, super important, ceteris paribus. Ceteris paribus assumption. If our hypothesis is to make sense, we need to also to make some assumptions. So an assumption is a statement that is supposed to be true for the purposes of building that hypothesis. In our example, an important assumption is this. The price of oranges is the only variable that influences the quantity of oranges that Polymunians want to buy, while all other variables that could have influence their buying choices do not play a role. So this is called the ceteris paribus assumption. Ceteris paribus is a Latin expression that means other things equal. Another way of saying this is that all other things are assumed to be constant or unchanging. So in simple, variable number one, prices getting higher. Consequence, variable number two, so fewer oranges bought, okay? Now, we need to consider that nobody else plays a role. So everything remains constant. When I say everything else remains constant, that means no other variable has an effect on this. It means we need to have ceteris paribus. So why is this assumption important? Our hypothesis stated that the quantity of oranges that will be bought is determined by the price. Surely, however, price cannot be the only variable that influences how many oranges Olimonians want to buy. What if the population of Olimu increases? What if the incomes of Olimonians increase? And what if an advertising campaign proclaiming the health benefits of eating oranges influences the taste of Olimonians? As a result of any or all these factors, Olimonians will want to buy more oranges. Okay? So this complicates the analysis because if all the variables change at the same time, we have no way of knowing what effect each one of them individually on the quantity people want to buy. So it's very hard if we have many more variables playing the role at the same time. We need to single out the variable. So we want to be able to isolate the effects of each one of these variables. To test our hypothesis, we specifically wanted to study the effects of the price of oranges alone. So this means we have to make the assumption that all other things that would affect the relationship we are studying must be constant or unchanging. So more formally, we would say that we are examining the effect of orange prices on the quantity of oranges people want to buy. Ceteris paribus. This means simply that we are studying the relationships between prices and quantity on the assumption that nothing else happens that can influence this relationship. I've already said that. So by eliminating all other possible interferences, we isolate the impact of price on quantity so we can study it alone. Well, in the real world, all variables are likely to be changing at the same time. This is the real world. So the ceteris paribus, and the ceteris paribus does not really, cannot be analyzed in such a way. That does not have a real effect of what happens in the real world. This term is simply a tool that economists use to build these hypotheses, models, theories. And this allows us to isolate and study the effects of one variable at a time. So we will be making extensive use of ceteris paribus assumption in our study of economics, okay? Now, number 4, the use of empirical evidence. Now that we are in a position to test our hypothesis to see if its predictions fit with what actually happens in the real world, to do this, we compare the predictions of the hypothesis with real-world events, and this is based on empirical evidence. Empirical evidence refers to real-world information, observations and data that we acquire through our senses and experience. So empirical comes from the Greek word euneipia, or empeiria, meaning experience. Here, the methods of economics differ from those of the natural sciences. Whereas in the natural sciences, it is often, but not always, possible to perform experiments to test hypotheses. In economics, the possibilities for experiments are very limited. So economists, as a consequence, rely on a branch of statistics called econometrics to test hypotheses. Now, econometrics involves collecting data on the variables of the hypothesis and examining whether the data fit in the relationships stated in the hypothesis. In our example, we must collect data on the quantity of oranges bought by these residents during different weeks throughout the year. And we need to compare these quantities with the different orange prices at different times in the year. So econometrics is usually studied at university level. Okay, do not panic because it's not part of the IB requirements. However, if you want to study economics at university, you will see this course. We're now in a position to compare the predictions of our hypothesis with real-world outcomes. If the data did not fit the predictions of the hypothesis would be rejected. Okay, super important. One more time. If the data did not fit the predictions of the hypothesis would be rejected, and the search for a new hypothesis would begin. In our example, this would happen if we discover that as the price of oranges increases, the quantity of oranges Olimunians want to buy each week also increases. So clearly, this would go against our hypothesis. So if we test through empirical evidence and we find out that there are no correlations, so we would have to reject the hypothesis as invalid. If, on the other hand, the data fit the predictions, the hypothesis would be accepted. So in our example, this would occur if our data show that as the price of oranges increases, Olemun's residents buy fewer oranges. So we can therefore conclude that according to the evidence, our hypothesis is a valid one. Okay, so testing that is super important. Number 4, use of empirical evidence. Now, theories in relation to hypotheses. We have seen that a hypothesis is an educated guess about the cause and effect relationship in a single event. A theory is a general explanation of a set of interrelated events, usually, but not always, based on several hypotheses that we have tested successfully. In other words, they have not been refuted. They have not been disproven based on evidence. We are going to analyze that discussion of refutation later on. So a theory is a generalization about the real world that attempts to organize complex and interrelated events and present them in a systematic and coherent way to explain why these events happen. Based on their ability to systematically explain events, theories attempt to make predictions. Referring to the example of oranges, let's take the example. The relationship between the prices of oranges and the quantity of oranges residents of Olemu buy at each price was a hypothesis. This kind of hypothesis has been successfully tested in great many times for many different goods. And the data support the presence in the real world of such a relationship. So, however, this relationship is not a theory because it only shows how two variables relate to each other and does not explain anything about why buyers behave the way they do when they make decisions to buy something. So to explain this relationship in a general way, economists have developed utility theory and indifference curve analysis. and they are based on a more complicated analysis involving more variables, more assumptions, more interrelationships. These theories try to answer the question as to why people behave in ways that make the observed relationship between price and quantity a valid one. Utility theory will be examined only at higher level, HL, in chapter 2. Well, the next one is the use of laws. A law, in contrast to a theory, is a statement that describes an event in a concise way, and is supposed to have universal validity. So, in other words, to be valid at all times and in all places. Laws are based on theories that are and are known to be valid in the sense that they have been successfully tested very many times. So a law is a successful theory tested many times. They are often used in practical applications and in the development of further theories because of their great predictive powers. However, laws are much simpler than theories and do not try to explain events the way theories do. For example, the simple relationship between the quantity of a good that people want to buy and its price, while not a theory, has the status of one of the most important laws of economics. It is the law of demand. This law is a statement describing an event in a simple way. It has great predictive powers and is used as a building block for very many complex theories. We will study the law of demand in detail in chapter 2, and we will use it repeatedly throughout this book in numerous applications. So the law of supply and demand, the law of demand will be used throughout the course book and as a building block for many other theories. To finish off with the role of positive economics is the importance of refutation. The concept of refutation is very important in economics and in any other social sciences. To refute something means to contradict, to disprove, or to show something to be false. Refutation in the sciences and social sciences is the idea that it must be possible to refute or disprove a hypothesis or a theory. So it must be possible to subject it to empirical testing, where the data or empirical observations can disprove it if it is false or invalid. In other words, if a hypothesis or theory cannot be refuted or disproven by empirical testing, then it's not scientific. Okay, one more time. If a hypothesis or theory cannot be refuted, cannot be disproven, so then it is not scientific. Refutation is also known as falsifiability, because if something is refuted, it is falsified. In other words, it is shown to be false. Now, you may know that our hypothesis about all-in-ones is refutable or falsifiable. So the hypothesis is if the price of oranges, the quantity of oranges Aluminum wants to buy each week will fall, we could collect data on quantities and prices of oranges. And if the data do not fit the hypothesis would be refuted. In other words, it would be falsified or disproven. So these are important elements in the role of positive economics. We also have the use of models. In your study of economics, you will encounter many theories and some laws. Your study of both theories and laws will make great use of economic models. Models are sometimes used to illustrate theories or laws, and sometimes to describe the connections between variables. Whereas sciences like biology, chemistry, and physics offer the possibility to construct three-dimensional models, as in molecules and atoms, this cannot be done in the social sciences, because these are concerned with human society and social relationships. So in economics, models are often illustrated by use of diagrams, showing the relationships between important variables. In more advanced economics, models are illustrated by use of mathematical equations. Note that both diagrams and mathematical equations are used to represent models in natural sciences, such as physics as well. So models are often closely related to theories and as well as laws. A theory tries to explain why certain events happen and to make predictions. A law is a concise statement of an event that is supposed to have a universal validity. Models are often built on the basis of well-established theories or laws, in which case they may illustrate through diagrams or mathematical equations the important features of the theory of law. So when this happens, economists use the term model and theory interchangeably, because in effect they refer to one and the same thing. In chapter 9, for example, different models of the macroeconomy will be used to illustrate alternative theories of income and output determination. However, models are not always representations of theories. In some cases, economists use models to isolate important aspects of the real world and show connections between variables, but without explanations as to why the variables are connected in some particular way. So in such cases, models are purely descriptive. In other words, they describe a situation without explaining anything about it. For example, the production possibilities curve model presented above in section 1.3 is a simple model that is very important because of its ability to describe scarcity, choice, and opportunity cost. Similarly, the circular flow of income model are presented in section 1.3. It describes how decision makers are related to each other in the economy and introduces the concepts of output, income, and spending. So in the case of both models, there is no theory or explanation involved. Well, but descriptive models that are not based on a theory are in no way less important than models that illustrate a theory. Both kinds of models are very effective as tools used by economists to highlight and understand important relationships and phenomena in the economic world. In our study of economics, we will encounter a variety of economic models and will make extensive use of diagrams. This is Test Your Understanding 1.12. You can pause the video now and prepare yourselves to answer this. Now, you can pause the video and check your answers based on the previous exercise. These are the answers from 4 to 6. You can pause the video to make sure you have your answers correct. Now, you will read a text in relation to talk, theory of knowledge. The text is Refutation, Science, and Truth. You can pause the video, read the text, and try to answer these two questions. You can see the answers of the two given questions. You can pause the video and check your answers. Now, we talked about the role of positive economics, but today we focus, on two. So what about the role of normative economics? The first point to take into account is value judgments in policy making. It was noted earlier that normative economics is based on beliefs and value judgments about what should happen, about what is good or bad, or about what is right or wrong. Value judgments are opinions. They are subjective judgments rather than factual statements. Know that The statements based on normative economics are not refutable or falsifiable. They cannot be shown to be false. One can only agree or disagree with them depending on what's one's own beliefs and value judgments. So we cannot say that this is false or this is right. You simply agree or disagree. Value judgments in normative economics are important for economic policy making. They identify the important economic problems that should be addressed and recommend policies to solve them. Economic policies are government actions that try to solve economic problems. Okay? So examples of economic policies are government actions to lower unemployment, lower inflation, protect the environment, improve the quality of education, reduce levels of poverty, provide free health care services, and many more. When a government makes a policy to lower unemployment, the number of people who are looking for work but can't find a job, this is based on the value judgment that high unemployment is not a good thing. If a government pursues a policy to make healthcare available to everyone free of charge, this is based on a value judgment that people should not have to pay for receiving healthcare services. So value judgments vary. In Argentina, perhaps, you might think that education should be free for everybody. But in the United States, on the other hand, people may not have the same ideas. Positive economics and normative economics, while distinct, often work together. To be successful, an economic policy aimed at lowering unemployment, the normative dimension, unemployment must be based on a body of economic knowledge about what causes unemployment, the positive dimension. So the positive dimension can provide guidance to policymakers on how to achieve their economic goals. Well, we can finish off with these two important terms. Positive economics is a study of economics based on the scientific methods used to arrive at knowledge about the economic world. It includes descriptions, models, hypotheses, theories, and laws. Normative economics forms the basis of judgments about what economic goals and economic policies ought to be. It is based on value judgments because it identifies important economic problems that should be addressed and prescribes what should be done to solve them. Now, another important aspect is equity and equality. So, an important concept from normative economics that you will encounter in this book is equity. Equity refers to the idea of being fair and just, or just. The idea of equity or fairness is a normative concept because fairness depends on people's beliefs or value judgments, which differ from person to person. Equality, on the other hand, is the state of being equal with respect to something. For example, equality with respect to income would mean that each member of a society receives exactly the same income. Equality is a positive concept, since two or more things are either equal or not equal based on a measure. So equality, don't forget, it's a positive concept. It's not normative. Why? Because we can measure. It's objective rather than subjective. The idea of equality in income distribution may or may not be equitable, depending on how equity is interpreted. If it is believed that income distribution is equitable or fair, if income is distributed equally, then equity in income distribution means income equality. However, if it is believed that it is equitable or fair for people's income to be in proportion to their work effort, a different equity principle, this would give rise to income inequality, since not everyone's work effort is the same. In spite of different possible interpretations of the meaning of equity, in most countries around the world, the pursuit of equity is usually interpreted to refer to government policies that try to reduce inequalities in income, wealth, and opportunity. This is because of the widely shared belief or value judgment that the free market without government intervention results in highly unequal income and wealth distributions that are considered to be unfair. So for this reason, we often find writers referring to a more equitable, more equal distribution of income or wealth in the same thing. So the meaning is the same. Equitable, equal, because both expressions are correct, provided it is understood that in these cases, equity in income distribution is interpreted as greater equality or less inequality. Two important terms: equity means fairness, while equality means being the same. While the two concepts have different meanings in economics, inequity is most often interpreted to mean inequality, while equity is interpreted to mean equality. Here we have Test Your Understanding 1.13. You can read the questions, pause the video, and do it. Now you can find the answers for your tasks. You can pause the video and check your answers. Now we continue with Talk Now. You will have a text that says, why do economists often disagree? You can pause the video right now and read the text. All right, you can read the questions based on the previous article, pause the video, and answer the questions. You can pause the video now. Now, you can have a look at your answers to the questions by pausing the video and comparing. You can do that with the next following questions. Check your answers, please. Pause the video now. All right, well, this is the glossary of Unit 1.4, words like logic, hypothesis, empirical evidence, theory, refutation, positive economics, normative economics, equity, equality, inequality. Thank you.